Hello and welcome to the Half-Ass Homestead. My name is Angie, and after a very, very long cold spell, a frozen drain field, and a bunch of other problems, we finally received about a foot of snow, which provides more problems.
Okay guys, plow truck did not start, starters out. Funny thing, so last year the plow truck didn't start, so we took the starter out of the 35 and put it in the plow truck, bought a new starter for the 35. The 35's not here, so we don't have a new starter, so...
Honestly, on something like a plow truck, a starter's never going to go out sunny and 75. It's going to wait till the middle of a snowstorm, which is always completely ideal. Just kidding. Andy worked on getting the snowblower attachment onto the front of the John Deere, which was the first time that he's ever done that. There were some difficulties, but he worked through them, and now we have a functional snowblower attachment for the lawnmower, which is a good backup. We also added another thing onto the to-do list because now we need to put a starter in the plow truck. This week's been pretty long and exhausting. As mentioned before, the drain field for the septic froze. We had a very long, very cold spell, and we didn't have any snow, so that's now frozen. Andy had somebody to come out and pump the septic, which is now being treated as a holding tank because the water has nowhere to go. So that's pretty interesting and expensive, which it's not ideal, but we're not the only ones, and we have it pretty good in comparison because I guess a lot of people have frozen septics or the inlet to the septic is frozen, which is even worse than you can't use water at all. So we're kind of floating in the middle. Not the luckiest people in the world, but it could be definitely worse.
Okay, so I picked up a deer, and I am on my way home to go gut it. I didn't have a knife with me. It's like a yearling or a fawn. She looks like she's in pretty good shape. So I don't think the guts are all busted. I think it was a hind quarter shot, which is a real big bummer because the front quarters are immaculate. But it's dark out. I can't make that assessment. We'll just have to make the assessment when we quarter her up tonight, or when Andy does, or whatever, and we'll find out what's going on there. It is 7 degrees, which means it's gotten warmer since I left the house the first time. Now, obviously, I am running a tick behind.
This deer was in a little bit rougher shape than I would have guessed. When I was gutting her, I was kind of getting that vibe. But anyways, the meat's not going to go to waste. All of the bloodshot's going to get fed to the chickens. So it's still usable meat for us, and it's free. So I'm going to give you guys kind of a general rundown of how we decide what we're going to do with the meat. Obviously, with circumstances, every deer is going to be a little bit different, but as a generalization, here's how we process our deer and how we use what it has to offer. We'll start with the fat caps, since those are the first things you take off. The fat caps we use to render down and make soap. It's not ideal to be a primary and only source of fat for a bar of soap. It's not going to offer a great bar of soap, but we use it heavily to make a decent bar of soap, cutting it with other fats and oils. You do not want to eat deer fat, at least the outside fat. It has a very gamey flavor, so that's why you always aim to cut all of it off of your meat, if you didn't know. And then on to, we'll kind of talk about like the big muscles on the hindquarters, like the round steaks. We typically save those for steak. This time around, we're not going to save them for steaks since we already have a big buck in the freezer and we have plenty of steaks. We have a few left from last year as well. So we are going to turn this into muscle meat jerky, a good solid 10 pounds of it, and I am so excited. Smaller muscle groups like the calves, something that has like a lot of silver skin, that all goes into canned meat. When you can silver skin, it pretty much dissolves, so you're left with a nice tender meat. Calf muscles prior to canning would just get pitched. There's so much silver skin on them and not enough meat to make it worthwhile to try to cut it apart. But if you can that, it's going to turn out nice and tender and you have nothing to worry about. So that's offered a lot of savings on deer meat. We get a lot of extra meat that way. Anything that we are cutting off that comes with silver skin or a little bit of fat, bloodshot meat, that all goes into a bucket and gets fed to the chickens. So we set up little containers and put them in the freezer, and we feed those out periodically to the birds, and they absolutely love that. We also save, obviously, our inner loins, heart, and back straps. Those all go into basically like steaks. Obviously, on a roadkill, unless it's very fresh and we don't have any busted guts, we'll save the heart and the tenderloins, if that's the case. Otherwise, we do opt out of the heart and tenderloins, and that's for very good reason, and I'm not going to discuss that with you guys. Our last thing is the neck roast. So on a buck, you're going to have a neck roast. During rut, you're going to have a nice, big, thick neck roast. You don't get as big of a neck roast otherwise out of a doe or a smaller buck, but there is neck meat there. We typically grind that along with, like the front shoulders. There you can do neck roasts. The marbling fat inside of a neck roast isn't going to have that awful flavor, so you're fine there. But that's kind of how the generalization of how we take care of our deer and how we use the meat and fat. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am going to finish cleaning up this deer, and I will see you guys in the next one.